Again. Hello, Felipe.
Professor Mauka, it's a great honor to be here with you today. Thank you very much. You know, I appreciate you a lot, and it's a great honor.
You know, we are missing each other. We are missing our colleagues all over the world, and especially I miss you. So I chose to interview you for our next anthropological conference, in which we would like to meet our colleagues and be closer to them in these new modern ways that we have in these days. And we all became the Zoom people. So I will start to ask you a few questions, and it will be some of them personal, some of them professional, some of them maybe national. Let's see. So please introduce yourself. What are your fields of work? Where are you teaching? Tell us something about Felipe Fernandes, Dr. Felipe Fernandes, Professor Felipe Fernandes.
Okay, my name is, as Malca said, Felipe Fernandes. I'm from Brazil. I was born in the city of Belo Horizonte, a very large city in the state of Minas Gerais in Brazil, in the middle of Brazil. It's close, it's up from São Paulo and next to Rio de Janeiro. So we don't have a beach, for example. We are in the middle of the country. And I was born and raised there. When I turned 21, I left my home to study, to do my master's. I'm actually not graduate, I didn't do my undergrad in social sciences. I'm a biologist, but I left there like 20 years ago. I've been working with anthropology for 20 years now, since the beginning of my adult career. But my first contact with science was through biology. Some people tell me in the beginning of my career, they would say, but why are you doing social sciences? Why are you coming to anthropology? And many professors told me, oh, you're so methodological. And I was like, I think it's my biology heritage, my Cartesian heritage, because in biology, we are very used to classifying things, doing taxonomy. And I worked with reptiles. I worked with botany when I was young. So my first contact with my colleagues from social sciences, they thought I was very disciplined and methodological. At the same time, I'm a grandson of an anthropologist. So my grandfather, Saul Martins, he was an anthropologist. He was not a cultural anthropologist. He was, I don't know how to say it in English, help me, Malka. He was a folklorist. I don't know if that word exists.
Ethnologist.
Yes, but he worked more with folklore, like popular. I don't know how to say it in English. I'm sorry. He was a collector. I have many of his pieces there because he died in 2009, and I inherited many of his pieces. He was a specialist in popular culture in Brazil. He loved artisanate, especially utilitarian artisanate. For example, wood spoons that people can use to cook and casseroles, I don't know how to say, pans and everything. So he was a specialist in that. He also studied ethnology, but he was not a cultural anthropologist. But I remember when I was 13, around 12, 13 years old, going to his house to have coffee in the afternoon, and he was teaching me how to do, for example, kinship graphics. What do you call it in English? I'm sorry, kinship. It's kinship.
Yes.
Trees, yes, kinship trees. And so even though I was not formally trained in anthropology, I was a grandson of an anthropologist, and I was raised by him, and he took me to many of his field works and everything. I remember, for example, an anecdote, if I can tell you. I translated Edward Evans Pritchard to Portuguese, one of his texts, the sexual inversion among the Azande. I translated it to Portuguese, and I was trying to get hold of him. Every day I called his work because he was an editor at the daily the daily, I forgot the name of the newspaper in London, the Daily Review, I think. I don't remember now. I called every day to ask for his father rights to translate this article. And finally, 6 months later, he answered me, and I was like, "Hi, my name is Felipe. I'm an anthropologist from Brazil. I would like to translate your one of your father's pieces." And then but let me know a little bit about you. And then I said the same thing I'm telling you, that I am a grandson of an anthropologist. And then Ambrose, Evans Pritchard, he told me over the phone, he said, "We, the sons and grandsons of anthropologists, we are a small family in the world. So you have the rights of my father for this piece." So not today is not the same thing, because my grandfather was a professor during the 40s and until the beginning of the 80s. So he's another generation. So anthropology was never something far away from my life. Even though I studied biology, anthropology was something very near to what, it was not something strange. It was something familiar. I know it sounds strange for many of us to say that anthropology was familiar for me, but it was. I grew up in this environment, anthropological environment. So in the late years of my biology study, I suffered a discrimination because I'm a homosexual. And in a biology class, a professor said that homosexuality was an abomination. And then I struggled, I stood up and said, "This is absurd, I shouldn't be here." And it was in the late 90s, beginning of the 2000s. And then this fight over this professor who was saying homosexuality was an abomination came to the media in Brazil. So it became a bit, how do I say, it's not
a big matter.
Yeah, a big matter, not too big, but not too small. So some of the homosexual activists from back then, they wrote me and everything. And then this was the shift, because many of the people who wrote me were anthropologists, were social scientists, interested in understanding how homophobia was an important value in Brazilian society. So I was this young student, like 17 years old, and getting many calls. We didn't have phones, or I had internet, but I remember it was email, but it was something like I had to turn on the computer and wait the whole night to receive the emails. I don't know if you remember that, Malka, but it was like that. And then I got in touch with many anthropologists, and from that I began to study the social theory of sexualities. So I started to read the classical works of philosophers such as Michel Foucault, of anthropologists like Evans Pritchard, but Richard Parker from Columbia University. I started to read those people who were working in Brazil throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s with sexuality, AIDS, and many other subjects linked to dissident sexualities. And then I met many other professors. I started to work with a great anthropologist from Brazil whose name is Miriam Pilar Grossi. Malka knows her very much. She was the former president of the Brazilian Anthropological Association, and also she just finished her term as president of the Brazilian Graduate and Research Graduate and Research Association in Social Sciences. I don't know how to say it. Then Malka can Google it, and then she can put on the subtitle the right name of the association. So I met her. She was a feminist anthropology. Her thesis was about violence against women in Brazil. And since I met her, we've been working together, and I'm very happy. It was like one of those good encounters in a Spinozian way. It's a good encounter that changed all my life, and we are still working together. We now have many research together, for example, in the field of the participation of women in anthropology. We have research on gender and sexuality in schools, violence against women. So this is my field. It's the field of gender and sexuality.
Where are you located these days? Where is your formal location, academic-wise?
Now I'm a professor at the Federal University of Bahia in the northeast of Brazil. Bahia is the most, the population is mostly Black, is the blackiest region of the world without outside of Africa. So we have an African culturality. I don't know how to say it in English. I'm sorry if I say some term that is not correct, but we have like this African ambience, heritage, very strong in this state where I'm living right now. I'm very happy, and I'm working as the co-coordinator of the graduate program in Ethnic and African Studies.
Great. Now I would like to turn to the special times we are all living, the Corona zone, the Corona time. And I would like to ask you in the two aspects, what it's like to be an anthropologist in your fields at the time of Corona, how you personally manage your life during Corona, your career during Corona, and with the special aspects of your specific identity and interests, what has happening in the last many months that we are living in?
Yes, it's a great question, Malka, and I need at least a few layers to be able to answer it. We have the political layer because we are facing a negationist, we have a negationist government that doesn't believe in vaccines, that is a negationist of the pandemic. He says things that are not scientific based. He puts a lot of politics in the pandemic. So we vaccinated. We are in the late February. We vaccinated less than 1% of our population. All of them over 85, if I think. And we don't have, the Ministry of Health didn't accept any vaccine. So we are living a horrible government, because our government, many people say it's a fascist government, is an extreme right government. But what I like to call it is an anti-intellectual government, is an anti-university, anti-education government. Those are people, when I see them, those are those middle-class, ignorant people, you see, that took over the government. So this is the one layer of the pandemic that is making our population very vulnerable. Just yesterday, we had the worst day with deaths of the whole time of the pandemic in Brazil. So things are getting worse. Things are not getting better. Things are getting worse. And yesterday was the worst day. I was in the funeral of a social scientist father's, a student of mine. She lost her father, and I went to the funeral. I stayed very far away, but I couldn't, because we can't go to funerals and anything. But she was a very hardworking student, and who researched the participation of women in the local politics in Salvador. So I was there. She was crying very much. So it's very hard in this political. In the mental health layer, it's very hard as well, because we can't see each other. For example, myself, I'm alone. I was alone the whole time of the pandemic. Of course, when I go to my countryside house, I'm a bit more free, because there is less danger to get infected or to get exposed.
Can you say something about this countryside house? How it is different than where you are in Salvador? And what does it give you?
Because in Salvador, I live in an apartment, and I'm very enclosed and isolated, and everybody is facing more conflict and this is in the individual level. I'm talking about my perception as an individual, not a big analysis. But in my countryside, we have more space. We can breathe more. You see, I don't know if I can make myself clear. My dogs can be less incarcerated in this isolation. I think the countryside is a bit more comfortable to live this time of the pandemic when I go there. But at the same time, in the countryside, we are facing more poverty. I can see that my neighbors, because I live in a village, mostly Black and African descent religion community, we call it Quilombola, but my neighbors, they are facing a lot of poverty. When everybody was talking about Miriam Grossi, when she was the president of Unpox, in the first day of the pandemic in Brazil on March 16, she wrote an email to all of the social scientists of Brazil and said, she and Rodrigo Toniol and her, they wrote an email and said, write a text about the pandemic. So for the first 7 months of the pandemic, every social scientist who wanted, nobody was obligated, they wrote texts, small texts about how they were living pandemic. So I wrote one of myself about the way I was living my isolation in the countryside house. And I said, everybody's talking about violence against women. Everybody's talking about education, how is the students are going to schools and everything. Nobody's talking about hunger. Nobody's talking about how, so the first human rights, my community where I was isolated faced was hunger, because they couldn't, because they closed all the supermarkets, but no money was circulating in the poorest communities of Brazil. So this was the first impact that I faced. So it was hard to see, not myself, but my neighbors, you see. That was, and that had a great impact on myself. I can say that I'm fullest happy, Malka, in this moment. I can say that because it has been hard. I've seen people in my family facing mental health issues. I've been seeing my neighbors facing many problems. So Brazil is a very hard place to live right now.
In these circumstances, which are very extreme and challenging and very little hope because of the political situation that you described, what has been left? What kind of anthropology, if at all, you have been doing? What have you learned? And maybe what opportunities have been open to you?
So this is a great question. I wouldn't say that we don't have hope. We have a lot of hope and resistance. We are not stuck as passive beings seeing all of this. One of the great achievements we had last year during the pandemic was the book Cientistas Sociais e o Coronavírus, a book published with 720 pages with wow. over I think 200 authors who wrote about the pandemic. So social scientists from Brazil, from all fields of study, they contributed in real time. They're given, let's think about the pandemic this way. Of course, it's not like the social science, it was an immediate social science, a fast food social science, because as we were living, we were trying to understand it. And as we were living and trying to understand it, we published the book. So the texts from social scientists during the pandemic in Brazil, they were published twice a day. So every day from March 16 throughout July 31st, I think, we had 2 texts by social scientists sent to us. I wrote myself one. Many people wrote texts. Many people, you know, Maka.
Where it was published?
It was published in the website of Unbox, and it was published as an ebook. It's free access.
But
I'll
did
send
it
you
come
the
to
link.
the public? Thank you. But did this access to the public or politicians or decision makers, was it isolation self-therapy, or was it a public intervention?
We are still, we have a conference that Rodrigo Toniol and Miriam Grossi gave last September. I can send you the link, and they analyzed this impact. First, of course, there was an impact in the field. It was nice to read every day what was happening, because the diversity of themes, we have anthropologists who were isolated in Bolivia. We have anthropologists who are talking about the UN politics. You know, we have a diversity of themes. We impact the media. I don't know. I can't give you an honest, veritable answer, but the many texts were translated to many languages. You see, there was an impact. We had a professor, Pamela Laurentino from Piauí, who saved all the texts on a pen drive, on a flash drive, and sent it by motorcycle to all of her social sciences students who lived in the countryside. And so the text being produced throughout pandemic, it was a great tool, not only to learn social sciences, to learn anthropology, political science, sociology, but also to understand what we were living in dialogue amongst us. It was one of the resistance that I think we were most competent in doing. I don't know. That's
great. But were there anthropologists or yourself that did the next step? Were there anthropologists part of the advisors for the politicians? Where there were anthropologists who were involved in the everyday struggling with the pandemic? Did we had applied anthropology or practicing anthropologists at this time, or it has been an intellectual exercise, self-intellectual exercise mainly?
I think, I don't know if I can answer your question, Malka. I think something that the professors from Unbox, and I quote again Miriam Grossi, have said in previous analysis, is that for the first time after the coup d'etat that took out the President Dilma Rousseff from the power, for the first time, all scientific associations became together and started to go to National Congress, started to publish articles in the media. You know, for the first time, we have this big scientific association coalition doing work. And when I say scientific association, it's not good to think it's only the directors, those big scientists that live on the top of the mountain. No, the Boletim Cientistas Sociais that I quoted before, that over 200 social scientists wrote, we had mostly PhD candidates, we have students, we have professors. It was not something, it was a big, great coalition of social scientists. I think my personal view is that we could have done more to occupy the public sphere, especially the media and everything, but we have done what we could.
Now I want to get back to the personal and professional. I want to ask you, you presented yourself as homosexual. You said that your academic interest has been focused on the life experience of people like you and the angle of women. What have you learned about homosexuals and women and these specific populations that you are dealing with during this corona? How corona has become a laboratory to continue your study of these issues that occupy most of your career?
Yeah, most of the discourses around gender and sexuality throughout this moment of pandemic, I'm talking mostly about 2020. 2021, I did less. observing. I was more like, oh, I'm on vacation. But on 2020, the discourses were mostly linked to the increase of violence against women. So the violence when the families got together 24/7, the increase of violence was great, and the overbearing of women who were taking care of families. So we had an epidemic of violence in Brazil and an epidemic of mental health issues for women who had tripled the work they have to do at home and at their jobs, you see? But at the same time, on my ethnography in the countryside where I spoke before, women were happy with the social isolation politics because they said, now I can spend time with my family. So we have a class issue linked to this discourses on violence against women and overbearing work at the house and at the job, because in the countryside house we have and in the poor communities we have one situation, and we have another situation in the big cities, in the buildings, for those women who are locked into an apartment. But for women, this was a big issue throughout the pandemics. For homosexuals, the loneliness was something that I heard a lot about, because everybody was talking about loneliness, how they were feeling lonely and how that was affecting. They were sad. They were talking a lot about how sad it is to see that when we have a social calamity, just like a pandemic like this, now we can see that we are alone, that we have no one, and we have no one taking care of us, and we take care of no one. So this was a bit different for women, for especially heterosexual or women inside family nucleus. But for LGBT people, especially trans people and male homosexuals especially, I heard a lot this discourse about loneliness and how lonely they perceive they were, but the pandemic played a role for them getting to understand this part of their lives. Does that make sense, Malka?
Of course. And then I would like to turn to the last two questions, I would say. One, after saying all that, I would ask you, each one of us got special gifts from this corona phenomenon. What are the special gifts that you got from this corona phenomenon that we are all witnessing?
I think the best gift, it was a moment that I fully understood the importance of reflexivity. I became more aware of the importance of calming down and thinking, because as scientists sometimes we are overbearing with work within the university, with students and everything. But in this pandemic, I could not relax, is sit down and think, and that was good. And I want to take it even after the pandemic is over. I want to take it to have moments to sit down and think, because I think this part of scientific work was being left out in this neoliberal mode of university. I think we have to sit down for 1-2 hours every day, look in the roof and think what's happening. I wasn't thinking, and the pandemic showed me that I need to think more.
So did you
Is that clear? I don't know, Mark. I'm sorry. I'm philosophy.
You are very clear.
Okay.
You are very clear. Did you made any decisions about how your life, how your career, what will be your focus, what will be your priorities will be? Now, in Israel, we just began to come out. Just this week, everything began to be opened. I know that Brazil is still far away from that. but do you have any thoughts or ideas of where you want to take your life after and because of this Corona experience?
Yes, I would like, Malka, things that I planned in the end of December. I did what I want to keep, what I want to throw out. I did this kind of game with myself. What I want to keep, what I want to throw out. What I want to keep. I want to keep working on my field of gender, sexuality, and history of anthropology, because I like this. I like to go to the archive and learn who was the pioneer of that certain university, and what were the conflicts to organize discipline and do field work. This I want to keep. The work on archives for history of anthropology. What I don't want to keep, I don't want to keep toxic supervisions of students who are too far away from my interests. Not that I only want to guide dissertations and theses on my themes, but I need to learn. Where I don't want to be where I'm not learning. You see, Malka, I want to learn more. You see, I was too stuck. And now I'm more, I want to learn. I don't want relations. The academic world during neoliberal times, the relations between students and professors, amongst the professors, between the professors and those are doing the bureaucratic work, they are becoming more like enterprises. I don't want to be in an enterprise. I'm a scientist. I want to be a critical thinker. And I think neoliberalism is robbing us of critical thinking and making it sounds like critical thinking is the enemy of the development and the progression. And I want to be a critical thinker. And to be a critical thinker, I need to be in a critical environment. So I want more criticism from our students, from our colleagues, from everybody. I think we need more criticism.
Wow, great. Let me ask you the final thing that it's from me. You know, we live in totally different countries that facing the corona. We are all double vaccinated. We are starting to come out. We are a small country, very little country. When you look or hear about what's going on in Israel, while you are still in Brazil, how do you see it, that the total different human experience? Yes, we still have our criticism. I won't say that it's a perfect world, but still, basically, it's a total different experience during the time of Corona. What is your look from way there in Bahia to what's going on here in Israel?
No, I think basically what I know about Israel is what Malka tells me. Okay, everybody who's listening to me, and I think it's a great example, because I remember I called Malka. I think it was in the end of December or beginning of January, and people were already starting to be vaccinated. It was like such a great example. While in Brazil, the president was saying that the vaccine is like some communists, I don't know what, he had like, I can't quote him literally because I forgot from now. So I think we have a question of size and a question of economics. Brazil is a big, huge country with very unequal. So we have this a small portion of middle class and upper class, and a big portion of low-income communities. And these people from the middle class and upper classes, it seems they think of the poor as a problem. They don't think of the poor as people, as humans, as what builds this great nation Brazil is. So I think there is a question of size, and I think Israel. You have Malka and myself in 2019. We went together to Auschwitz. Do you remember, Malka? And you talked to me a lot. That was one of the great classes I had in my life. It would be completely another different situation if I didn't go with Malka. So thank you, Malka. I'll never forget you for that moment, for that class. We cried a lot. It was sad. It was not something, but it was very important. And I learned with Malka. So I look at you as great examples of facing the pandemic. But I don't have a lot of elements to compare. But I hope someday we can strengthen networks between our universities, so we can get to know more the context of our countries. I'm in two different networks, Malka. It's important to say about gender ideology. One of them is gender menaces. I don't know, gender menaces. I'm trying to translate in my head with people from France, from Paris 8, from Paris 8. So we are comparing the governmental discourses against gender in France and Brazil, and we have a similar project with people from from Poland that I met in Poland, Malka. And now we have this project. It would be nice to have bilateral. I'm not talking about money. I'm not talking about financing. I'm talking about exchanging information, having channels of dialogue to exchange information, not only Malka and myself, because we can call each other and see, but our students, our professors, our colleagues. I think it would be very nice to exchange. I would like to learn more. As I said, I'm in a moment that I want to learn, and I'm very thankful to Malka, and it always will be, and Anita as well, for teaching me, and Renato for teaching me about Israel. Because, I've told Malka, sometimes you are so far away, but this far away is not only distance, geography. It's also to have the information in front of you. Sometimes you don't have the information, so you become ignorant. So if we can make dialogue, so I'm privileged guy because I have Malka, and I have Anita, and I have Renato, and I have a few others. But it would be nice to have a more frequent dialogue from the comes and goes, and when it comes again and goes again, always more dense and more qualified. It would be very nice, Malka.
I wonder where we will meet again face to face, whether it will be in Israel, in Bahia, or in the next women conference in Mozambique. So we have something to look forward to for our next meeting. Thank you very much, Felipe. It was amazing and interesting. And I feel now that Israel and Brazil are much closer, at least both of us. So yes. I'm closing up the recording.
Thank you.